again, we're back at it here. This is episode. A lot of things to talk about, both local, state, and of course, can't talk about the national presidential race. That's an important part of folks here in South Carolina's lives. And so we need to know what's going on. And so let's get going. I am Shannon Grady. This is my co-host.
John Cummings, good morning.
We are going to be talking to you first about how the schools in South Carolina line up in the national rankings. So it came out. The number one school in the state of South Carolina is the Academic Magnet High School. I believe that's located in Charleston County, and it is actually ranked 8th nationally, which is pretty good. So it's the top 10 in the nation. Long way down until we get another school. Number 2 in South Carolina, Charles School of Arts is 142 nationally, which is not terrible given how many schools we have across the country. Then third, we have Spring Hill High School, ranked 738 nationally. And is 4th in South Carolina and 886 nationally. Mayo High School for Math and Science and Technology is 5th, and it is ranked just 1,001 nationally. Palmetto Scholars Academy is 6th in the state, 1,117 nationally. And then down in my neck of the woods, York County area, we have number 7 in the state. Fort Mill High School is 1,147 nationally. Nations Ford High School, also in my neck of the woods, is ranked 8th in the state, and it's 1,201 nationally. Chapin High School is 9th nationally, and then Wade Hampton High School is 10th in the state and 1,372 nationally. A little disappointed that I didn't see my alma mater there, Clover. I know it is one of the great schools, so it's probably somewhere in the top 20 in the state. And I don't know where that would put it nationally, but yeah. So we have some schools that are doing some good things, and that's a positive. It's always interesting, John. You and I both are teachers, and we kind of understand what some folks don't understand is that there are ways in which they can sometimes do this scoring or this ranking that are a little suspect. And I'll give you an example. Some of the states, the way they rank it is based off of standardized test scores. So, if this particular state has an average score of, let's say, 800, on the SAT or something like that, that may bump them ahead of another state. The problem with that is South Carolina, where everybody is encouraged to take the SAT, not just people that have, a college track, if you will, they're planning to go to college. They want everybody to take it. Now, there are states, certainly in the Midwest, and even as I understand it, in the Northeast, that only want those students on the college track. They're ones taking the college preparatory courses. They want them to take the test and nobody else. So that's going to cause a skew in the results, because obviously if you've got everybody taking the test, certainly there are individuals who have no intention or no need to go to college. So that's going to cause the scores to be a little bit difficult to truly. That's a variable that you really can control. But so I take that with a grain of salt. What do you think, John? Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, it really depends on state to state. And then the other things, as you move around the country and even locally, some schools have special education populations that in some states are included in the testing, and in other states they are not. So that can skew the results. Then you also have the ESL programs, English as a second language. So there are some states that include those kids, and there are some states that don't. So that really, especially now, where I just saw that in New York City, they're accepting 20,000 more illegals into the school system, none of whom are vaccinated, by the way, for any vaccines, not just the COVID vaccine. A lot of these children don't have any vaccines. Meanwhile, they fired everybody. They fired all the teachers who didn't want to get the COVID shot. And now they're letting kids in who don't have any vaccines. So that's another story for another time. But yeah, that when you look at those nationwide statistics, you really have to take them with a grain of salt. I mean, kudos to the schools down in Charleston that did as well as they did. But like I said, it's a campus magnet type of school. It kind of implies that they take better students, and they should finish higher than they do. I think the buried lead in all of this is there are many urban areas that are getting away from these highly successful high schools, especially in like in New York City. The best school, Stuyvesant High School, which was right down by the old Trade Center, Bronx High School of Science. These were top schools in the country, and yet because of equity, diversity, inclusion, whatever you want to call it, they want to add students to those schools that didn't pass the test. And they felt that the reason they gave was that they felt that they were discriminatory. So they eliminated the amount of Asians that could get into the school because those are the kids that were doing extremely well on those tests. I mean, it's
Well, that
mind-boggling.
sounds legitimate. Come on.
Yeah, please. But, those tests, especially when you're looking like, education is not a national issue. It's not. At least it shouldn't be. And once we started the Department of Education in 1979, if you go back and you look at the graphs on success of education, we've bottomed out since we went national with education. Education is a function of the state, not of the federal government. And the quicker they get rid of the Department of Education, I think the better off we do. Some states will sink with that ESL stuff, and other states will do extremely, extremely well because they don't include that stuff. And all that stuff does is take up time from the basics that you need to learn to succeed in this society.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't know, what the answer is in terms of getting rid of the Department of Education. I know that there have been a couple of candidates running who have said that that's something that they would get rid of. Foolishly thought, well, this should be something that the president just says, look, I want to get rid of this, and Congress votes on it and it gets done. But I think we can now probably agree that let's say that Trump does win and somehow he gets into office and he says, I'm going to remove the Department of Education. I think we can all agree the Democrats are going to be up and on. No way. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be a fight. I personally think what we really need is a good attorney to prosecute this case all the way to the Supreme Court, that there is no power granted to the federal government to create a Department of Education. It's unconstitutional, wholly unconstitutional. It should be reserved to the states and the people thereof as a constitution.
Agreed. Under the
State.
Reserve Powers Clause, right? It's under the Reserve Powers Clause. If
Exactly.
it doesn't, if it's not spelled out that it belongs to the central government, it belongs to the states. But of course, what happens, and this isn't just true with education, the federal government waves all of this money, over at the states and say, hey, look what we got over here. They raised, that's the carrot, and they all bite. And then, of course, you have to take all of the stuff that goes along with that. And that's always
exactly
risky.
right.
And that's what happened with Common Core, and that's what always going to happen when the federal government waves money. States who are in budgetary holes say, yeah, we'll take that, but then you have to take everything that goes with it. And that's unfortunately, that's the way it works. And we need to get rid of that. And that huge bureaucracy that is the Department of Education. And again, it's just the onion. Keep peeling the onion and you get more onion.
Yep. Yeah. Well, continuing on the vein of education, let's talk a little bit about our superintendent, South Carolina Superintendent of Education, Ellen Weaver. She recently made a decision that I support in having the South Carolina to leave oh my gosh, what's it called? Oh, the National Library Association.
The librarians, yeah.
Yes, because if you're not aware, they're the ones that were kind of putting on this drag queen show, read to kids kind of nonsense. So she wrote to the Association of School Librarians on August 25th to inform the professional organization that, quote, the South Carolina Department of Education will formally discontinue any partnership with the SCASL as an organization effective immediately. Now, and then she went on to justified in seeking to ensure educational material presented to their children are age appropriate and aligned with the overall purpose of South Carolina's instructional program and standards. She said when SCASL labels those efforts as bans or censorship or a violation of educators' intellectual freedom, the result which does not serve the needs of parents. So, of course, the Library Association responded and stressed the work it does on behalf of students and parents, including efforts to engage in parent-school activities, by saying that, teachers need to have this autonomy to teach from whatever sources they feel are appropriate. And I more strongly, because when you start saying that you know what's best for my child, or more so than I do, then we have a problem. You didn't birth my son. You didn't raise him in the first couple of years of his formative life. And I'm not going to just give him over to you like he's, a ward of the state. He is my son. And I will absolutely have a role in what he is being taught. And, how dare you try to tell other parents across this nation that they don't have a right to know what their child is being taught and to disagree with what their child is being. What do you think, John? I mean, this is insanity.
Well, this is the left's approach, no matter who it is, from Joe Biden down. You hear them say all the time, "These are our kids; they're not your kids."
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
these are my children, not your children.
right.
They're my children, and I will make the decisions. And if the Librarians Association can't understand that, and they don't want to understand it, well, you just have to decouple from them. It's much more than that. I was watching Steve Bannon the other day, and I had a gentleman on who is taking on Scholastic books. Now, Scholastic books, I mean, for all of us, even when I was in school, the book fair was a
Right.
was a big thing. In
Oh my
fact, my
gosh, yeah,
sister, who's
huge.
retired, my sister's a retired teacher. She taught for 42 years, and she still runs the book fair at her old school. And I had to call her and tell her, look, Scholastic, if you look at the books that they're including in
Yeah.
the drop that they give to schools, some of them
Mhm.
are unbelievably inappropriate. And the gentleman went on and was hesitant. He was hesitant to read from a book that was geared for kids from 8 to 12 years old because it was too vulgar and too pornographic to read on television. And
Yep.
he read a little of it. And I mean, I can't say I was shocked because I
Yep.
knew it was coming, but totally inappropriate. So they're going after
Yep. And they shut
Scholastic.
it.
Yeah, they're going after Scholastic books. And that's really the right thing to do. And here's the buried lead in
Yes.
all of that. You know who the major shareholder of Scholastic books is? BlackRock. BlackRock is the
Shocking.
major, yeah, they're the major
Oh,
shareholder. I mean,
huh.
they and State Street and Vanguard, they own 87% of the S&P top 500 companies.
Uh,
So,
Folks, if you don't know
this is
this,
all a coordinated
BlackRock,
effort.
Vanguard, they are the real boogeymen out there. If you don't
Yeah.
know, I tell you right now, go read "You Own Nothing," Carol Roth, and then read "The Naked Capitalist" and "The Naked Communist." It doesn't matter which order you read them in. Yeah, it's yeah. So that somehow I'm not surprised by that. That's their way of kind of indoctrinating our kids for the year have for them intended in the future. So,
And we
what
have
is yours
to
to say?
she was looking into it before she put any of the books out. So she had to, go through every book that they were sending. She, the Catholic school that she works in, and they're still sending the Catholic schools
Right.
the books. So that's something that you really have to stay on top of. But as family people around the country, and I don't care who you are, race, creed, color, ethnicity, it doesn't matter. If you're
Yeah.
a parent and you don't have a problem with adults who want to talk about sex to your 8-year-old,
Yeah.
you're part of the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
think about that in the grand scheme. Why do these people want to talk about sex of any type? I don't care. I don't care
Yeah.
if you're pushing the LGBT. It doesn't matter. You should not be
Exactly.
talking to children about these issues. That is a job of the parent. I don't think there should be any of this stuff. None of this stuff should be mentioned until
Yeah.
I think high school and maybe junior year of high school. All right, we get the
Yeah.
biology part of it. I understand all of that, and that is not science. That is fact, right? It's two gender.
Yeah.
Sorry. Next question.
Well,
But none of that should
I
be brought
was
up until high school.
Yeah, now I was in 5th and 6th grade, and we had our first, if you will, we had girls went in one area, boys went in the other, because at that age, that's when your bodies start to change. You start going through puberty. And so it was a way to kind of prepare the females and prepare the boys for your voice is going to change, and the girls, hey, you're going to start menstruating, and this is why, and so on and so forth. So that was our first introduction. I don't know that they do that. And if they do it, who knows how they handle it, because, now there's 15,000 genders according to these knuckleheads. Folks, I'm here to tell you, as John just said, there are two. You're either male or female. There's nothing else. If you're born a male, you're always going to be a male. If you're born a female, you're always going to be a female. You can change your outward appearance. You can change your outward attributes, but still what God created you to be, which is either a male or a female. Now, going back to the books real quickly, I like what was done down in Florida. The legislature put together a bill. Governor DeSantis signed it into law, and I'd like to see that replicated across the country. And it's simply this: it says, if there is a book in that you will not allow a parent to read in front of the school board, it is to be removed from the shelves. I'm like, perfect. If
Yeah.
you can't read a book that your kid has access to because it's too pornographic, then it should not be in the school libraries. Full stop.
Yeah.
Mean that they can't get it somewhere else, if they go out to a Barnes and Nobles and buy it, because that would be true censorship, and that you're banning it and you're burning it, and I'm opposed to that. But if it is in a school, no, Absolutely not. My child and the children of millions of Americans should not be pornography, period.
Yeah, the fact
So
that we're
I
even
don't, I don't
having
know.
this discussion is mind-boggling. We shouldn't have to have this discussion. But my thought on this is simple. If you're taking this issue, which is obviously a very sensitive issue, and there's a lot of people who have a lot of opinions on it, if you have to present it to children in cartoon form,
Yeah,
well, that's all you need to know. These kids are too young. That's a very serious issue. And if you want to talk
yeah.
about serious issues, kids are smart. Kids are really smart. They're
Mhm.
sponges, and they soak up everything. You do not have to present that in a cartoon form, for one. But two, the fact that you think that you have to present that issue, and I've seen some of these cartoons, like I said, they're pornographic, period. But if you have to
Yeah.
do it in animated form, that's probably a juxtaposition that you shouldn't have. If you should be teaching this to 16-year-olds in plain sight. No cartoons needed. All right, because then they're serious enough, they're adults and they can handle it. But if you have to approach this very, very, very serious and sensitive issue with a cartoon,
Mhm.
you should probably rethink the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean that there's your glaring warning right there. Danger, danger. Agree, John. So again, we just want to protect our kids, and I think most parents out there, the 90% of us out there, we want to protect our kids. There's that 10% that they're off the deep end, and got to pray for them.
Yeah,
Now, in as
82
much as we're,
genders, yeah, 82
yeah,
genders, but you can't balance a checkbook.
right,
Right? I mean,
exactly, yeah.
don't
So
teach don't
yeah,
teach finance, don't teach
yeah,
anything about economics, don't teach any of that stuff. And I always say that's the buried lead. You could talk all you want about the curriculum, the left-wing curriculum, and everything that it involves. The bottom line is it's taking away from time necessary to get information to our children that they need to succeed. And you don't need to
exactly.
be spending time on like I said, 82 genders or however many they have this week. It's all nonsense.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine that I attend church with when I'm home. It's my home church, and her son. This happened back in 2019, so it's been a couple of years ago. But her son was 10 years old at the time, and he got shoved down by a 12-year-old um, boy, and the boy that shoved him down was black, and he shoved him down and said, "Your ancestors had slaves," and it ended up breaking his wrist. It broke his wrist. So and his mother was not angry at the child who shoved him down. She was angry at what the media and his parents are teaching him. We don't have time to be teaching hate for something that happened, a century before you were even you weren't even thought of. Your grandparents weren't thought of. We can't do that. That's to me a to go and annihilate all of the Jewish people because they crucified Christ. What in the world? Stop it.
Yeah.
He
And throw in
came
the
to
Romans too,
save.
right?
Right, exactly. So we've got to do a better job of that with our children. But to that end, as if education isn't a big enough problem, we have more issues. The left is infusing itself. I'm just going to stop calling it left. I'm going to say the Marxists are infusing their communism poison into every aspect of our country, from our education to our electric grid. And so that kind of leads us into our next segment that John wanted to talk about today, and that is what's happening here in the old state of South Carolina with electricity.
Yeah, and how this all happens when we have this supermajority of Republicans in Columbia is beyond me. We are chasing what Dave
Squishy
Walsh.
Republicans.
If you're unfamiliar with Dave Walsh was the CEO of Mitsubishi Systems for many, many years. So he's probably one of the foremost experts on energy in the country, and he's a straight shooter. And he came on the other day. I saw him on Bannon. Bannon has him on a lot, and he talked specifically about Duke Energy and North and South Carolina.
Mhm.
So Duke Energy has a 15-year plan that's going to cost $130 billion. That's billion with a B, right?
Wow.
And what they have to do is they're looking to replace 8,400 megawatts of coal assets that they have, and they're looking to switch over to wind and solar. All right.
Jeez.
So that'll be $8.7 billion per year just to formulate the generation, meaning just to convert over to wind and solar. They
Now,
usually
John, does
spend
that
nine.
mean they're going to pay this? They're going to pay this out of their pocket?
Obviously, the ratepayers are going to pay it, right? So it usually they spend 900 million per year in creating new sources of generation. So now they're going to spend 8.7 billion a year. All right. It's going to
To
increase. Yeah.
8.7
Right.
billion.
It's going to, over the 15-year period, it's going to increase capital costs 10 times, tenfold, which will all, of course, be passed along to ratepayers. And,
So what you can expect is your rates are going to probably go up
10
equivalent,
times,
10%, 10 times.
10 times if you want. And the other part of it is it's part-time energy. So you're lessening your base load. I mean, your base load, the one thing obviously about gas and coal and everything is it's full-time. You don't have to depend on the wind and you don't have to depend on the sun, because most of
Right.
those things don't work for the majority of the day. It's
Right.
just the way it is.
Yeah, because we have
So
night.
they're going to be short quite a bit. I mean, the growth is expected to be about 9%. That's as they move along with this. That's how much
So
energy they'll be able to
they're trying to
generate.
California the
Right.
Carolinas.
And demand is going to go up 23%. So you're only producing 9% more energy than you would. And the demand is going to go up 23% because of the growth down here. And it's going to overload the grid. It's very unreliable. Like I said, you're getting rid of your base load. You're going from a full-time base load to a part-time base load. And then you're going to pass all of that along to the ratepayer. Now, here's the other part. A lot of companies come to South Carolina simply because of the low price of energy.
Cheap energy.
Full
Yeah.
stop. Full stop.
Yep.
I mean, you could say, oh, they got a tax break, and we all know that they've handed out money
Yeah.
out there that they shouldn't have handed out. But a lot of it has to do with the cost of energy. That's why so many European companies come over here, because they come to South Carolina. They like the workforce. Yes, they like all of that. But the biggest reason is because of the cheapness of energy. Well, that's gone. It'll be
Yeah.
gone in 13 years. So now you're going to have all of these companies come here, like Volkswagen, they gave that big blank check to. All of these companies that come here, and they're going to look up and go, oh, wait a minute. This is what we pay for energy in Germany. You know, now Germany took that, you know, they chased the carbon ghost before anybody. You know, that's what Dave Walsh calls it, the carbon ghost, you know, the big boogeyman.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, China is building coal plants every day. They're expected to build 500 next year. India is building coal plants. So those two countries, they're the largest countries in the world. They are not chasing the carbon ghost. They're just not. They're saying, oh yeah, eventually we're going to reduce carbon emissions, yada, yada, yada. But they're building coal plants all the time. Now, one more thing about those coal plants that they're building. They have 75% less emissions than the old coal plants do. We started calling it clean coal. If you remember back in, I even think when President Bush was in office, they talked about clean coal energy. Well, that's what they mean by clean coal energy, that they've reduced the emissions 75%, which is, look, that's notable. And instead of building, you know, generators, we could build clean coal. We could stick with natural gas. We could run pipelines. We could do whatever we want to keep the price down. Instead, they're going to try to go to these part-time renewables, which is going to be a total flop, and we're going to have less of an ability to generate electricity, and we're going to increase the amount of people who need electricity because, one, we're growing a growing county, especially down here, and hey, let's plug our cars in. I mean, this is just going down the wrong path, and why people can't see this, I have no idea.
You know, I saw something interesting on Facebook, and I thought this is so true. There is a natural method for removing carbon from the air, from the atmosphere. It's called tree, and they grow by themselves. You plant them, you know, they get watered, they grow, and they suck out the carbon, and then they produce something that we all need. What is it called, John? What is it they produce? You know, oxygen.
I can't remember.
So, listen, here's the thing. If they really cared about this carbon footprint, and this was something that was generally designed to save our planet, then they would tell all these people building, like here in my neighborhood, that come in and level all the trees that's happening across the state right now. They'd say, stop doing that because you're removing our carbon filters. You can only remove, you know, X percentage of trees because we need to continue to filter out the carbon. They don't give a crap about the carbon footprint, aside from the fact that it's granting them access to our money. They are doing everything in their power to strip all of us of anything and everything. As we talked about last time, they're going to use this to try to take away home ownership automobile ownership in terms of gas-powered vehicles. And they're going to even limit what you're able to do if you own a battery-powered vehicle, because as John just got through explaining, the electricity that's going to be necessary to maintain a grid that has all of these electric vehicles and our homes is going to be unsustainable. So that means that you and I are not going to be able to travel the way we once did. By going from here to 3.5 hours away to go see my mom is not going to be something I can do on a routine basis. And they talked about this again. I cannot stress enough. Please go get the book. You are worth your time to read that book, because she talks about the fact that there is about $85 trillion in money that's about to change hands. And it's because you've got this boomer generation that they're passing away. And so all of the things that they've accrued over their lifetime is going to be transitioning to the government wants a piece of that pie. She also noted that there are only 800 billionaires in our country. So they are wanting you to believe that they've hired 87,000 new IRS agents to go after the billionaires. Remember, you got our man Bernie Sanders. Yeah, we're going to get the money, get the billionaires. Okay, folks, you don't need 7,000 IRS agents to go after 800 billionaires. You don't.
Armed IRS agents.
Armed IRS. You don't need. They're coming after you and I, and they're already doing it. There was a time when you could spend and deposit money in your bank as long as it's $1,000. You were good. And then it became $5,000. Guess what it is now? If you spend or add $600 into your bank or any form of Venmo, Cash App, whatever, the government gets a notification. So what they've essentially done is, like, if you're retired, you're working on the side now, you're doing stuff at the flea market, you're selling whatever, you're making crafts. I've got a cousin who's blind in one eye and has to have shots in his eye to keep the vision he has. So he does some crafting because he's only 63, so he's not that old of a guy, but he physically can't work anymore. Yeah. Right. So now he's going to have to start paying taxes because everything he makes, they're going to know about it. So he doesn't make very much as it is, but obviously in a month's time, he might make $600. Well, now they're going to start taxing that. So it's like your kid birthday money anymore. Track everything you do. So, it's like everywhere you look, again, whether it's in education, whether it's in electricity, whether it's in your food production, speaking with some friends on Facebook, a lady put out a message and said, look, we're about to have a beef shortage. And I was like, I don't know, is this made up? Well, my sister actually works for a company here in South Carolina that's called Brown. And what they do is they get the cattle in, they slaughter them, and they send out the beef. Now, they're predominant suppliers to restaurants. So they supply all the steakhouses and the Mexican restaurants and the Chinese restaurants, so on and so forth. They ship the beef to them. Now, my sister said, for the last 3 weeks, we've had to short the order. So let's say, for example, a restaurant said, I need, 40 pounds of sirloin, 100 pounds of ground beef, whatever. So instead of getting 40, they only got 20. Instead of getting 100 pounds of ground beef, they only got 50. So they've been shorting the orders. And so the restaurants were calling up saying, hey, what's going on? You need to find another source. I mean, oh, no. When we get to this holiday, everything should be good. Well, now the holiday's here, and guess what? Not only are they shorting the orders, now they're canceling the orders because they're not getting the cows. Why are they not getting the cows? It's a mystery. We don't know. I have my own suspicions. I think part of it is when you got, tens of thousands of cows suddenly dying in a fire. You got dozens of cows suddenly dropping over dead from, we don't know why. When you have someone like Bill Gates purchasing all of the grazing land where cattle used to feed, and trying to convince us all that this new fake meat is going to be the thing. There are all these reasons why I think that's happening. But if you aren't paying attention, oh my God, I don't know what else we can do to get you to wake up and get active. If you're not registered to vote, you need to register to vote. If you are registered to vote, you need to vote. And you need to know who you're voting for, know where they stand on the issues, and please ask them, do they know what's happening in the world? To that end, I had the fortune to run into Congressman Russell Fry, stop by my store a couple days ago. I think it was the day before yesterday. And we had a good conversation, 10, 15 minutes. And I kind of talked to him. I said, how is the South Carolina delegation? I mean, how do you get along with Nancy Mace and versus a Ralph Norman versus a Jeff Duncan? Because you've got some very conservative folks, and then you've got some folks who, as I said, Nancy Mace is a moderate at best. But John and I were just talking about it. I've been very pleased with what she's done lately. I mean, she's been a bulldog on some of these commissions. I mean, wouldn't you agree, John?
She's been great. We probably disagree on some social issues, and I
Yeah.
think that's why she's viewed as a moderate, and
Yeah.
it's really social issues. But otherwise, economically speaking, she's usually pretty conservative, as far as tax issues and the like. But there has been no one who has been more vocal about the need to start the ball rolling on removing Joe Biden than Nancy Mace. I mean,
Yeah.
she has gone out and she has basically passed along to we the people about as much information as she can without violating the issue that that's what's going on in some of these committee hearings is closed door stuff, and there needs to be that. I understand that you need to keep some of it private, at least until you get all the information. But she's been great. But to get back to the beef issue for a minute, there's so much going on there. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
When you think about the fact that so much of our beef now is imported, whether it's cattle or just scraps. We
Yeah.
import scraps and then put it into chop meat in supermarkets, etc. And what the government has done is they've made it almost impossible for you to be a local farmer.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
They've put so many mandates on you and so many regulations that it makes it impossible for somebody to make a living like that. And this is the time when we need local farming. And I've always maintained that that's one of the issues I think that has caused people all around this country to develop illnesses that they never had,
Right.
because you're bringing in bacteria from all over the world and all over the country rather than just having your local germs. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
simple. It's as simple as that. And obviously, I understand the free market. I understand how the free market works, but we should really be in a position to buy almost exclusively from local farmers. But the government has made it nearly impossible, and they've done so. They've passed all these laws. Look, the beef industry, and I mean the king beef, if you want to call
Right.
it that, they're the ones that lobby our representatives and all these big fundraisers for them. I mean, follow the money to pass these laws and regulations that make it cost prohibitive for local farmers
Right.
to operate.
The
And
small
it's
guy.
all one big nasty web that we've weaved or they've weaved. And it needs to be stopped. We need to simplify this process, especially for local farmers, because they just can't make it. And I think we need to eat local.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. In fact, I know my son had some allergies growing up, and they said, okay, wherever you're living, you can't be honey you get in the store that's been brought in from wherever because it won't be effective. But if you get local honey, it's going to have the necessary ingredients to prevent him from having these allergies. So we did that, and it works. So every time we move somewhere, I've tracked down the
Right.
local honey, and that's what we use. And by the way, just kind of side here, honey just so I've had people say, "Oh man, my honey's nuts crystallized." I'm like,
Yeah.
add water, it's fine, it doesn't
Yeah,
go bad.
gets gooey, but other
Kind of
than
like
that,
salt.
yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I was laughing. I saw somebody put a meme up on Facebook. It said, 250 million year old salt, and then it went out of date. And they're going, "Man, lucky me, it just went
Yeah.
out of date." I'm like, no, it doesn't go out of date.
Yeah, and
So
that's one of the issues that, because I know you put this up on the banner that we were going to talk about this. That's one of the issues that I think some Republicans look at Bobby Kennedy Jr. and say, "Wow, this guy's on the money." And on that issue, he is on the money. I mean,
right,
there are a lot of issues that he is on the money on. There are a lot that he's not, that I completely disagree with. But he to me, he represents the populist left, and Trump represents the populist right. But at least it's a populist idea, or their ideas are populist, meaning that they benefit we the people, and they're not talking about big government. If you saw Mike Pence yesterday in his outrageous speech, just berating Trump and everybody else who follows Trump, as populism is going to take us down a road that we'll never recover from. Excuse me, Mike Pence. Look, it's about we the people. All right? It's
yeah,
not about you. It's not about big government. It's not about your donors. It's not about anything else. And you know what? I've really come to view him as somebody who's quite sinister. He plays that role. He wears he wears his religion on his sleeve, and then he comes out and just berates people for thinking a certain way.
Yeah.
And I find that so contradictory. And you know what? Everybody's on to him. Everybody's on to him.
Yeah.
He's just like I said,
Wolf in
he's
sheep's
turned
clothing.
into this sinister. Yeah, he's turned into this sinister character. But to get back to the populism, Bobby Kennedy talks about that all the time with the food choices that we have and how poor they are, and the fact that he has 7 children and 5 of them have serious allergy issues and immune issues. It's unbelievable.
Well, speaking
Not
of
a
that,
coincidence.
did you see Megyn Kelly came out kind of joining with Dan
Yeah.
Bongino on the vax and said, look, until she's 52, so just a year younger than myself. She came out and said, look, I didn't have these autoimmune issues until this vaccination. And the booster, she asked her doctor, do you think it could stem from this? And the doctor said, yes, because other patients in the same situation are starting to exhibit the same types of illnesses. There are some folks speaking up. I hope that we're not going to go back into any form of what we had in 2020, whether it be the masking, whether it be the mandated, shots, whatever. I don't want to see any of that happen again. I'd like to see freedom reign. So it'll be interesting. Now, it's to that end. Let's talk about RFK out there about making him Trump's vice presidential candidate. And I'm just going to share one little piece of information with you as to why I'm opposed to it. If you know anything about Rush Limbaugh or Glenn Beck, they are not supporters of the climate change ideology. And Robert Kennedy is a huge proponent of climate change, so much so that he actually said Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck should be put in prison and or executed because of what they have said against the climate change philosophy. Now, who's calling for other individuals to be arrested and or executed because they don't agree with climate change should be our vice president. I am not going to agree with you. No, thank you. I'll pass. Hard pass.
He said that he wouldn't do it anyway because he's a Democrat and he won't join with the Republicans, and I understand that. The thing that I really disagree with him on, and I'm sure he said that he was all riled up and he got a little carried away and whatever.
No, he said it in multiple, and he had an opportunity to recant it, and he reset it. Yeah.
But more importantly, the things that I've seen from Bobby Kennedy, and I really appreciate the guy's honesty. He's honest to a fault. He really is. He says what he means, and he means what he says, and you're right. He rarely retracts things. He really does. Mm-hmm. But I've seen him speak about renewable energy, and he always claims that the renewable energy is cheaper than the energy that we have now. Now that's not true. It's just simply not true. It's not even close to being true. Not even in the long term. The one thing that he does talk about that is more expensive than anything is nuclear energy, which is true, unfortunately, because of all the,
security measures.
Everything that goes into that. Maybe we could do it on a smaller level. Who knows? But that's where I strongly disagree with him. I would love to see him debate Dave Walsh, who, like I said, is the energy guy for Mitsubishi Systems. I would love to see them because Dave talks all the time about the fact that these renewables are far more expensive than anybody says they are. And the base load is part-time. So that's one of the issues that Bobby Kennedy Jr. and I differ on. I mean, there's a lot more, of course, most of the social issues. He did come out with something the other day about the 3%, but the 3% mortgages.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that. What he wanted to do was, he's really what Bobby Kennedy was saying, and I don't like the interference of governments any way.
Thank you.
Not in that form when it comes to mortgages. But what he said was it's unfair that the generation that's coming up now can't afford homes because the prices have gone way up and the rates have gone way up. So what he wants to make the government your rich uncle, meaning that he wants the government to offer 3% mortgages.
Meaning you and I.
Right. I don't like the government getting involved in that. I understand the intention, and it's a good one. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and very often government programs are viewed or judged based on their intentions and not their results. That's probably the biggest problem we have in government. Intentions are always good. I mean, there are people that have good intentions, and I'm sure that Bobby Kennedy's intentions are good. He wants to see people own homes that are in this generation that can't. But the best way to get around that is to fix the economy. And we could do that very, very quickly, but nobody wants to do it. You can go back to the taxes that you talked about. Look, let's be honest. The wealthy don't pay their fair share in this country. They just don't.
Right.
And the reason is that the tax code was created by people who take money from these groups and these individuals that create this 86,000 page tax code that allowed them to get all the write-offs. Now, if you went to a flatter, fairer tax where, if you make over a certain amount, you pay 25%, when the only write-off you have is your mortgage payments and charitable contributions, and then everybody else pays 10%, the revenue in this country would go up astronomically, because you would have wealthy people paying 25% and not the 13% they end up paying because of all the write-offs. So I end up paying 25% and they end up paying 13. Now, if you could flip that, we'd have more money than we know what to do with. We could fix the economy in 2 seconds, and guess what? Everybody would be able to buy a house and the rates would come down because it'd be competitive, and the banks would have to be competitive again.
Well, going back to this 3% idea that the government offers a 3% mortgage rate, that's a pardon my French on this, but a hell no. And let me explain to you why. I believe it was Maxine Waters a couple of years back had a big, commission hearing, whatever, and she drug in all the bankers and said, what's going on? You've been doing the student loans, and now the kids can't pay their student loans, and what do we do? And each one kind of said, well, I student loans. And so finally, when she gets to the end, apparently she did not even realize that the government had taken over student loans. And it was the government.
Yeah, under Obama, right?
Yes, it was the government that was controlling the student loans. The banks have nothing to do with it. It's like, that's how our wants to be in Congress. They don't even know that they have taken it over. So here's the problem, folks. If the federal government steps up and allows everybody to have a 3% mortgage, it sounds fantastic. Here's the problem. There are lots of people out there who cannot pay their bills on time. Doesn't matter whether or not they have the ability financially to do so. They would rather go out and buy something else because it's flashy and it's new, and they'll go spend it, and then, I'll pay my house payment later. So when they go into foreclosure, guess who picks up the dime on that, folks? You and I, the taxpayers, are going to pick up the dime. So that's a no for me. Just as paying off student loans was a no for me. I don't want to bail out anybody, period. Individuals, companies, nobody. You don't take our hard-earned money we then send to the government that's supposed to be for defense and infrastructure, and now they're just creating all these appropriations out there to spend our money however they want. I'm sick of it.
Right. And
tax is
yeah, I agree. And what he's trying to do, I understand, but I don't agree with the approach, because his fear, and he talks about this all the time, Bobby Kennedy Jr., and he's right, is that by 2030, big corporations will own 60% of the private houses in this country, because that's what they're doing. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, they're going around and buying up private houses. Yeah. And so many people now, they'll think they're closing on a house, and then all of a sudden some shadily named LLC comes in and pays cash for the house, and they take it right out from under you. And that's becoming more and more and more common, because what they want to do is they want this to be a rental society. Yep. They don't want you to own anything, like you said.
Yep.
So his idea to try to get away from that is the right one. It's just that his methods are bad. I mean, you don't want to involve the government in that, not to that regard. You don't want to be, and then like you said, if people default on their mortgage, well, then the government owns all of these homes. So what are they going to do with these homes? You probably won't be able to sell them, because the market is going to be full of these houses. And what they'll do is they'll probably house people who don't have housing, which might be illegals.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say this, if they want to fix it, why don't we use the same monopoly we already have on the books and just simply say more than 10% of the housing in a particular state or region can't own it. That leaves 90% to be owned by either, small property owners or individual single family homes. That's what it should be. Not let's grant everybody a 3% federal loan. No. That is not something that is sustainable. And again, this is not even into account that we're looking at a BRICS takeover that's coming rapidly on the heels of all this other inflation that we're dealing with. And BRICS, of course, again, is a group of countries that are now extending themselves to 7 more countries. You got Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Saudi Arabia is not going to join. Iran is going to join. I think the Emirates are going to join. I mean, there's several states, nation states that are joining.
All of our all of our allies.
and even some that aren't. And so they're going to come together and they're going to create their own currency to trade with, and the dollar is going to become. It's already a fiat currency. It doesn't have any backing other than they there was the petrol dollar, and now we don't really have that either. And so now it's just like the strength of the government. We've been downgraded from AAA to AA. Does anybody think that Biden represents a strong administrative government? I don't. I mean, what is it? 69% of Democrats think he's not doing a good job. That's so that's the
Yeah,
strength of our dollar, folks. It's
and
not good.
the scary part is that look, they did this on purpose. If you don't think that that they didn't do this on purpose, they're
Yes.
not stupid. They did this on purpose because they want this globalist, one new world order,
Well,
whatever
yeah.
you want to call it.
Yep.
That's what they want because they know if you have someone in there like Donald Trump, no matter what you think about him, he wouldn't stand for that because he understands business as a businessman, not as a politician. And people worked with him. And here's the buried lead too. He's wildly popular in Europe because even the Europeans understand that he was on the right track when it came to economics. The Germans understand it. The
Yes.
French people understand it. The Italians understand it. When it comes to economics, he was on the right track. It was kind of a balance between, okay, we like the free market, but we have to protect ourselves.
Mm.
So there is this whole, I guess, shadow of protectionism. And I'm not an isolationist by any stretch, but when we went quote unquote free market, we went completely overboard.
Right.
Completely overboard. And there are people like Donald Trump who understand that there have to be things that must be manufactured in this country.
Yes.
Like pharmaceuticals and any type of emergency supplies and medical supplies. There are things that need to be produced in this country. And he understood that. And that's why he went crazy with the tariffs on the Chinese and he brought in a lot of money, gave it to the farmers to help them out. That's not something that free market conservatives would normally like. But what you have to realize is that we're getting to the point where we might end up being isolationists anyway.
Yeah.
And it might be us against all of these countries. And
well,
we're
free
going to have
market
to bring
has to be balanced
manufacturing
with
back here.
security. And I think you have to have a free
Oh,
market.
absolutely.
But when free markets then put your national security at risk, you've got to have a balance there, which is why at one point in time, 80% of our medication was made outside of this country. That's not good, folks. It should never, and it shouldn't all be made in China. You can put, say, maybe 30% somewhere else, and the remainder is made here in the United States. Everything should be that way, whether it's chips, whatever it is. We should never be in a situation where we make none of something that is important to our infrastructure. The chips are important to everything. We need to manufacture at least 20 to 25% of the chips right here, period.
And
so
just one more thing, and I know we've spoken about this before, but I think it always bears repeating. In May of 2020, President Trump, proposed a stimulus package that was $2 trillion. $1 trillion was COVID release. Now it's May of 2020, so we were in COVID about 7-8 weeks. So he proposed that package: $1 trillion for COVID relief and $1 trillion to bring manufacturing back to the United States, pharmaceuticals, any type of medical procedure materials, chips, things like that. And of course, kill that right away because, and here's they didn't want to give Trump a win before the election. The hell with the country. The hell with it. They don't care. And I always say the radical left would far prefer to rule over a devastated United States, a completely devastated United States, than to allow a populist person from the right, like President Trump, to get back into office or to stay in office. And that's the bottom line. They'd rather destroy the country.
Well, yes, it's the old saying of, be careful who you put on your ship, because some of them, just because they're not. And I think the Democrats, I agree with 100%. They would rather sink the ship than allow Trump to be the captain.
And now McCarthy's the captain.
That's not true. No, it's absolutely true.
And McCarthy's going to sink the ship anyway. So
well, here's a question. Why has he brought articles of impeachment? Come on, what's going on?
This is simple. He should have ordered the House back. Should have ordered the House back during the summer. Once they got that information that they got on Joe Biden and his family, he should have ordered them back to Washington and say, get back here now. And you don't need an inquiry. You don't need an inquiry. You could draw them up simply.
You don't need it.
You didn't have an inquiry with President Trump for quote unquote January 6th and
Sure
protesting.
didn't.
You didn't have one.
Mm-mm.
They had those
Nope.
articles already drawn up. So don't play
Mhm.
games. All right. And then we won't even get into the continuing resolution when it comes to the budget. They need to shut that government down. Shut it
Yeah.
down. All
Yeah.
right. Until we straighten
September
all of this
30th.
out. Right. You have a $2 trillion deficit that we knew was going to happen. And they said, oh, no, it'll never happen. It'll be fine. There won't be a deficit. We'll just do it. We'll do this budget. And McCarthy signed off on it. McConnell signed off on it. And what'd you get? You got a $2 trillion deficit, just like we predicted, because
Mhm.
revenue is in the
Yep.
toilet. Revenue is way down because the economy is in the tank. So you're not taking in the money that you thought you were going to take in. And
Biden
$2 trillion.
economics is working.
Oh,
Biden
sure. Well,
economics are working.
it probably is in his mind, but
Right.
he's basing it
Did you
solely on
Did you
Baskin
see him
Robbins
on
and
the
their.
beach? Did you see him on the beach? And the reporter went up and was talking to him, and he said, "Oh, I'm not on vacation. I just don't have anywhere to go."
I don't have a house, right?
He probably thinks he is. The man's a complete. He's a dementia patient. Needs to be somewhere in a home. Shouldn't be serving in the White House. It's embarrassing. It is.
We're in trouble. Yeah, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, we're. I don't even
trouble.
know. Trying to be positive and keep an uplifted spirit. I last night I'm in church at a Bible study, and I'm listening to the pastor talk about hope, and kind of breaking down what that means. And I thought, without Christ, we don't have any hope. So that's my hope is in Him. It can't be in anything else. We've got work to do. We cannot sit on the sidelines, and people need to understand that. Don't let fear prohibit you from being involved. I mean, gosh, and they are doing a good job of creating fear. I mean, they've got four indictments against Trump. They've also just recently, we talked about it. They have what's his name? A guy from Proud Boys. They just sentenced him to 22
Enrique
years.
Tarrio, right? Enrique
Yeah,
Tarrio.
thank you. And wasn't even there.
Wasn't
Might
there.
want to note that he wasn't even there. And they gave him 22 years. So if they could give him 22 years in DC, going to do to Trump when he comes before this Democratic judge, who has made, I mean, I don't know which judge is worse. They're all just completely asinine. I can't even believe the things that come out of their mouth. It absolutely, it boggles the mind. And again, folks, this time I'm supporting DeSantis in the primary, but so I don't want you to think that I'm like, oh, she's just a Trumpette. No, I'm not. I'm just telling you what they're doing to Trump is so appalling. There aren't words to express how wrong this is. I think they had Dershowitz on the other day, and he was talking about, be considered a banana republic, and we're at 6 bananas now, and depending on how things go, we could be to 7, 8, and eventually 10 pretty quickly. And then we're just, once we're a banana republic, there's no turning back. I don't know, John. I don't know, what happens.
And
I don't
and
know.
now they're trying to run the 14th Amendment up the flagpole because they
Oh yeah.
realize that the indictments aren't working. In fact, they're having a reverse effect. Trump has been able to raise more money than he had raised previously. He's becoming more popular, and he's becoming more popular with the groups that traditionally don't vote for Republicans, namely African Americans and Hispanics. But look, it's the working class. And what has happened with Trump and those indictments and that great photo that he took, that is an absolute classic, the mugshot, it's given him street credibility. Now, all of a sudden, people who would never identify with the wealthy billionaire identify with the wealthy billionaire because guess what? The government is coming after him in an unfair fashion. And that 14th Amendment thing, if you listen to any honest constitutional expert, they'll tell you that the whole thing is a joke. I mean, the Constitution is very, very clear. It tells you here's what you need to be the president. All right. And as
Yeah.
far as the 14th Amendment concerned, there was adjustments that were made to that amendment twice that basically made everybody realize that, look, this was reserved for people who were involved in the Confederacy. Case closed. That was it.
Right.
Case closed. I've heard Professor Dershowitz speak about this. If you want to see a good article about it, I won't read it on the air. But twice, Congress in 1872 and 1898 passed amnesty acts based on the 14th Amendment. So, and it said in the 14th Amendment that Congress could do that. So what they did was twice, 1872 and 1898, they passed amnesty acts, 1872, required 2/3 vote removing all political disabilities imposed by Section 3, except for members of those two Congresses. And then in 1898, they removed more exceptions. And there was no language preserving any of the disqualification for any future cases. And so they basically created their own amnesties twice after the 14th Amendment. Then they said, okay, now everybody who served in the Confederacy is pretty much gone, so forget it. So the whole thing is a joke. Constitution is very clear. It says, here's what you need to be. You need to be a natural born citizen, right? You have to have lived in the United States as 14 years, a resident of the United States, and you had to be 35. Done. That was it. They wanted to make it as simple as possible. So anybody who's trying to create something, oh, we're not going to put them on the ballot. It's the state has every right to do what they want to do because the state's in charge of elections. No, dopey, because it's very clear in the Constitution, and you have the Supremacy Clause. I hate to get in my teacher's, role here, but you have the Supremacy Clause, and when it comes to the Supremacy Clause, guess what? Here's your qualifications for the president. Case closed. Doesn't say anything about crimes, convictions. Doesn't say anything about that.
So here's my concern, because the Democrats play dirty. So what if they let Trump win the primary, and then he's in the general election, and they wait until early voting, whatever, and they remove him from the ballot? Obviously, Trump's attorneys are going to have to step up immediately and file and get to the Supreme Court, and hopefully the Supreme Court will rule quickly. But how many votes is he going? Yeah, how many votes is he going to lose between that time and the election? I mean, they're going to cheat. It's not even jail, because I'm telling you, they're going to find him guilty. And I think he's going to be found guilty in probably 2 situations.
Oh, and Washington's got Washington's got no shot.
And I think Florida, they're going to find him guilty in Florida. I don't know about Georgia, maybe. And the New York thing is stupid. I don't even know why that's even still carrying on. It's
the thing with Georgia, I'm really looking forward to Georgia. I there's part of me that thinks that case is never going to be heard, because what Georgia does is it allows once and for all, people who supported Trump and even people who didn't support Trump, it allows them to present information that shows you beyond a reasonable doubt,
like 150 witnesses that they're calling.
That 2020 election in Georgia should never have been certified. Right. And I'm not talking about machines, and I'm not talking about things coming from the moon. I'm not talking about any of that stuff.
Right.
I'm talking about 67,000 votes that were counted, that were cast by people who no longer qualified to vote because of their residences. Right. I mean, we'll just start there. We don't even want to get to the drop boxes and 150,000 votes that they had that had no chain of command, which is completely in violation of Georgia state law. There's a litany of things, and they have proof. They have proof. So if it finally allows them to present all the evidence, why would you bring that case? I don't think, I really don't think that's any of it is ever going to come to trial, because it's finally going to give President Trump and the people who believe that election was stolen. And like I said, many of the people are not Trump supporters. Colin Favorito, who has been involved in voter integrity in Georgia for decades, he was a registered Democrat. He wasn't even a Republican. He's always been about integrity. And he said there's no doubt in his mind that President Trump won Georgia. This is a guy who's not biased. He's about election integrity. So if they allow that case to go forward, the whole thing falls apart. It's also the reason why, in my opinion, that they still haven't released about 11,000 hours of what went on January 6th. And if you've been following Laura Loomer lately, I don't know if you've seen this, where and the media has done their best to squash this. She came up. Remember the shaman? The guy with the horns? So
I remember him.
They found a picture of him posing with someone on January 6th. And this guy happens to be a Ukrainian spy. He's a Ukrainian spy.
Fabulous.
All right. He's a Ukrainian spy. And And so Laura Loomer saw the picture, and she asked, and this all has to do with that whole Nazi thing that went on down in Florida. All right. This guy was involved in that. It's all the same group. They were brought into Charlottesville to try to mess up that protest in Charlottesville when Trump supposedly said that, Nazis are good people, that he didn't say. So all of this is all this same group. And when they saw the picture, so she got in contact with the shaman guy, and she said, did you know that this guy was a Ukrainian spy? And he said, not at the time, But when the FBI interviewed me, they asked me about the picture and asked me if I knew this guy. And I said, no, I don't know who he is. They said, people just wanted to pose for photos with me because I had the horns on and everything. So everybody wants to get a picture with
Right.
me.
Right.
And he said, I had no idea. And they told him, the FBI told him and his
Yeah.
attorney that the guy was a Ukrainian spy. Now go back to 2014, and Laura Loomer comes up with a picture of this guy who was part of that whole neo-Nazi group over in Ukraine. He's in a photo with John McCain and Lindsey Graham. Same guy. And this guy was in the Capitol on January 6th. He's a Ukrainian spy. Everybody knows he's a Ukrainian spy. There are guys that
Why is he in the country?
They were involved in that neo-Nazi movement down in Florida. There are guys that are on the national terrorist list, and they haven't gotten called in for anything. And the media has completely squashed this. But that picture of John McCain with his hands on this guy's shoulders and Lindsey Graham is 2 people away from him in Ukraine in 2014, after they overthrew that government that was duly elected. You might not have liked the results, but that's who the people voted for. And all of a sudden, this guy's in a picture with John McCain and Lindsey Graham, and then he's on the steps of the Capitol with the shaman on January 6th. Are you kidding me? So now you know why the 11,000 hours aren't coming out. There are way too many people that were on the steps of the Capitol that day or in the building that were there for a different reason. They were there for a different reason. And it's just to stage.
FBI agents are planted in that crowd, and they don't want their pictures to pop up.
Absolutely.
I
and
totally
it
get
was
it. Because somebody say, hey, I recognize that guy.
On,
he works for the FBI. Yeah.
All to get Trump on insurrection charges. So you have our government, notably the CIA, they knew, and the FBI, they knew that you had a guy who was a Ukrainian spy who was involved in January 6th, and he was never called in, ever. And they knew who he was. And you're locking people up for 17 years for knocking over a barricade, and you had Ukrainian spies there?
I mean,
none of it
washed. Here's the thing. If they knew he was a Ukrainian spy when he was in there in 2014, how the heck did he get into the country? I mean, did they just wave him through and passport check? I mean, come on.
Yeah. That's what the boogeyman does.
It's the clown show.
It's all intel op stuff. Intel op stuff.
So, well, we got to keep our eyes out for the carbon ghost. We got to keep our eyes out for, I mean, it's just, I can't even watch my 6 and your 6 and everybody else's 6. And so you got to pay attention, folks. Please be well read. Don't just listen to, even just John and I, don't just listen to the talking heads on other shows. Read, dig for yourself, investigate, and you're going to find that there's a lot of stuff happening, and you need to start protecting yourself. So I hate to be like the other conservative shows, buy gold and silver, but you better get something besides just the paper dollars, because it's not going to work for you. So, and make sure you've got at least 6 months of food, because there may come a time here quickly that you don't have access to it. And you may find yourself like some of the Russia, Soviet satellite countries now, you may find yourself going to the grocery store and the shelves are bare. So just plan ahead. Don't be caught unaware. So, well, that's all I've got for today. John, anything else before we wrap up?
Just ask everybody just to remember that everything that the radical left is doing is done to restrict our freedoms. Period. Case closed. And that includes Duke Energy. And we here in South Carolina, we as a people, we need to get involved in this whole issue of these offshore wind farms, onshore wind farms, solar panels, etc. We need to stop Duke Energy from entering into this $130 billion 15-year plan to convert us to renewables that's going to make our rates skyrocket and really throws off the reason as to why businesses relocate here in the first place.
Yeah. If you don't want your energy bill to go up multiplied by 10, then you need to reach out to your state representatives and say, hey, we need to step up and stop allowing the energy sources to be limited to, quote unquote, non-renewable or renewable energy, because it's not, as John said, it's not sustainable. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So we have got to make sure that we have durable energy. That's the bottom line. So thanks, folks, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. And we'll be back again next week to talk about more things. And again, I'm going to press this book one more time. You Will Own Nothing, Carol Roth. Buy that book. Take the time to read it. That's all I've got. God bless. Godspeed. And as always, we'll see you next time.